Opulent test. Opulent test. Come on, grammar people.
Everybody, welcome back to the Ro3 Podcast. I'm your host, Jared Clifton, and I'm joined today by my co-hosts, Brendan Taff and Blair Perot, as well as two special guests, JJ Winter and Kyle Allen. We're going to spend the offseason going through all the latest in free agency draft considerations and strategies to get your team ready for 2021. But before we get kicked off, let's check in with our coast-to-coast hosts. On our East Coast, Brendan Taff. Brendan, we haven't really had a chance to talk through the blockbuster trade between the Rams and Lions. Does the addition of a hopefully healthy Matt Stafford make the Rams the favorites in the NFC right now?
What's up, guys? I think the Bucs are the favorites, but the Rams are absolutely top three. A lot of teams are an elite quarterback away, but very few are just a Matt Stafford away from really competing. But I think the Rams are one of those teams. They're in the toughest division in the league, but we'll finally get to see if it was really just the abysmal Lions franchise that was preventing Stafford from winning playoff games.
And on our West Coast, Blair Perot joins us. Blair, conversely, is Jared Goff effectively a bridge to the future in Detroit since they have an opt-out with a $0 cap hit after 2022?
I would have to guess so. I don't see why they would make that trade for all those first-round picks if this wasn't just a tank situation. And today they ended up not tagging Kenny Golladay. So it doesn't really look like they're trying to give Goff much to work with or looking like they're really trying to win with him. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to move him or just end up cutting him in 2022.
You think they try to grab someone this year or take a look next year with Keaton Slovis or Sam Howell from North Carolina?
I would expect that they probably, try to wait until next year and get as high of a pick as possible. Seeing as there's no lottery like in the NBA with the NFL, it does incentivize teams to tank a little bit more.
Well, they'll damn sure have a shot to go in 16.
Yeah.
And joining us tonight are two of the Rod Potters, Ro3 Dynasty co-founder JJ Winter and our injury guru Kyle Allen. JJ, in the other big QB-related trade, Carson Wentz is off to rejoin Frank Reich in Indianapolis. This certainly seems like a healthy reset for him. So what does his ceiling become now with a solid O-line and potentially better weapons?
Thanks for having me on, Jared. The most frustrating issue, I think, for Carson Wentz managers is his wide range of outcomes. Last year, Carson was the worst version of himself. He only played in 12 games with terrible weapons and an abysmal offensive line, and he finished QB 22. So that has to be his floor. Ceiling, depending on health, could easily be top 5. I mean, he did that with less talent on the Eagles, right?
He did.
Yeah.
So, we're starting to start doing some mock dynasty startup drafts, and Carson Wentz is a guy, especially in two quarterback and super flex leagues, that I still see very, very low. QB 24, 25, 26. Is he a guy that you're looking at as your super flex guy or your second quarterback because everyone's soured on him?
Hell no.
No?
Hell
Okay.
no. No, I learned last year, I did 3 startups, and I tended to wait on my second QB until the 20s, and I wasn't happy with anybody I got. So maybe as my third QB, but no, I'm not relying on Carson Wentz for anything in Superflex.
Who'd you rather have, Wentz or Derek Carr in startup?
Give me Carr.
Derek Carr.
Yeah. I know what I'm getting with Carr.
Jared Goff, Carson Wentz.
Wentz.
Okay.
Yeah, Wentz.
I was just kind of curious where he was landing because again, the name's still there. We've seen what he's capable of doing, and being in Indianapolis, I'm probably going to screw up and end up overdrafting him, but man, he really looks tough to pass up at that particular range. And Kyle, with franchise tags looking to be liberally used on wide receivers this offseason, and guys like Chris Godwin and A-Rob already tagged, Looking at guys like Will Fuller, Curtis Samuel, Juju Smith-Schuster, Corey Davis, Nelson Aguilar, who stands to benefit the most for the next grouping of free agent wide receivers?
Yeah, any of those guys I feel like could benefit greatly from a new landing spot, but the ones that I am most excited to see where they end up is Curtis Samuel, who I would love to see end up with somebody like the Green Bay Packers that can use his skill set and put him anywhere on the field. He can run the ball. He can obviously catch the ball as a wide receiver, so I think he would be a very fun fit for that offense. And then Corey Davis. A lot of people are thinking that the Titans are going to let him walk, so I'd be excited to see where he will go. A team I'm going to talk about later might be a good landing spot for him, but I won't spoil the fun.
It's interesting you say the Packers because that was the first thing that came to my mind. And, this is going to be the first offseason I've seen in a while that it's so stacked with legitimate, wide receiver two compliments to Devontae Adams. And they tried to do it with Devin Funchess and that type of player before, but, man, I'd really like to see one of those guys. And I think Will Fuller probably fits the best as a compliment to Devontae Adams. Give Rodgers a weapon. I think they kind of ended the season on a sour note. I'd like to see him finish his season with the Packers, so any of those guys, I'd love to see end up in Wisconsin.
Absolutely, yeah. A lot of people thought they were going to take a receiver in the draft last year, and then they ended up going with Jordan Love and A.J. Dillon. So it'll be interesting to see what they do between free agency and the draft in Green Bay this year.
We're going to jump right into our main segment for the evening from our very own Brendan Taft. So over the next few weeks, we're going to go division by division, team by team, and talk to the fantasy-relevant positions, where each team stands in regards to their needs come draft day, and red light, green light. I'll turn it over to Brendan.
So the next few pods will be dedicated towards our traffic lights exercise. Each position on each team in the NFL will get assigned a red light, yellow light, or green light. Red light means a terrible landing spot for a newcomer, such as the Chiefs QB position, and green light means a great or likely landing spot, such as the Jets. Yellow light is everything in between. So I'll start it off here with my Buffalo Bills, and the first one here is easy. QB spot. The Bills finally have a red light at the QB position. Last year, Deshaun Watson signed a 4-year, $156 million contract, and yesterday, Dak Prescott signed a 4-year, $160 million contract. So after Josh Allen took a huge step into the MVP conversation this year, I think he'll get a deal this offseason right around where those two guys got money. And if any of you guys disagree with me, you can come find me in Buffalo. Do I have any opposers to that?
None.
No,
None.
I don't want to be put through a table. No.
All right. Well, I'll keep it going then. The running back position for the Bills, yellow. Now, I've got some friends who would probably be mad at me by saying that because the Bills took Devin Singletary and Zach Moss in each of the last 2 third rounds, and neither one has really panned out how Bills fans would have hoped. I've seen a lot of mocks already giving the Bills Najee Harris out of Alabama in round 1 at pick 30. But I'm not typically a fan of taking running backs that early in general, and I think the Bills have some bigger needs. On the last Ro3 Dynasty pod, I advocated for the Bills signing Marlon Mack, give him some time to rest, speed around the edge, get healthy, be a third weapon there. It's an offense that relies on the passing way more than the running. It's a yellow light. I wouldn't be surprised if they take another running back in the second or third. I would if they do in the first. What are your guys' thoughts on that? Blair?
I think this one is actually a little better than maybe yellow, maybe like a greenish yellow, just because neither of those guys are anything to write home about. And if we're already talking about Marlon Mack potentially coming in and competing, that's not necessarily a huge name. So if he already has maybe is a front runner to be the starting running back there, then I think there's a little more potential there than you're giving them credit.
Yeah, I have to agree with Blair. I think it's bright green. I don't think they're attached to either of these running backs. And if they have a shot at a Najee Harris, a Travis Etienne, somebody who can come in and really be a stud running back for that team, think of how electric they would be with Diggs, Etienne, and Josh Allen. Yikes.
I agree Buffalo definitely needs an alpha there, but if that front office is going to commit to Moss and Singletary, a good fit for them would be a third down receiving kind of back that could really contribute in the passing game. Think about your free agents this year. You've got James White, you've got Amir Abdullah, you've got Jerick McKinnon, guys that can come in, be pass catchers.
Did you literally just say
but it was
Amir
just
Abdullah and Jerick McKinnon as guys who can come in and catch passes?
Hey, the first guy I mentioned, James White, he knows about the Super Bowl.
He does, yeah. Part of it also is Josh Allen's ability and proclivity to run in the red zone. So fantasy-wise, I don't know how many touchdowns, a new star running back would get vultured from number 17. So that's just another piece of it.
That's fair.
Do you think Zach Moss has what it takes to be a goal line back?
Yeah, I do. He was banged up a little bit at times this year, but if we give him, 10, 12 touches through the middle, Brandon Beane, our GM, has mentioned this offseason that the running attack is much more, to the blame or give credit to the O-line than the actual running backs in the backfield. So I do think Zach Moss can be a guy to punch in a bunch and be a guy to lead it out of the backfield there.
Yeah, and I think you guys nailed it. I think they're probably going to look at more of a complementary back to those two. The offense changed so much from 2019 to 2020. They were a much more conservative ground game based offense, and then they turned it loose to Josh Allen last year. So I don't really know that we've seen the capability of Zach Moss and Devin Singletary in year one and year two respectively. So I think they probably give those guys, they like them on the rookie contracts, get another guy probably in the third, fourth round, and just kind of plug away. They've got the offense where they don't need that star back as much. No need to spend it in free agency, and I don't see any reason to waste the first or second.
Yeah. I'll keep it moving. Wide receiver. Now, wide receiver's an interesting one here, and I was about to put yellow, but I put red. Stephon Diggs, absolute star, 3 years left. Gabriel Davis had a great rookie year out of the fourth round. Cole Beasley has 1 year left after this year, and John Brown is returning in his last year. Now, the reason why I put it red and not yellow is because of Gabriel Davis. He was such a surprise. Amazing on deep passes, 20 yards plus. If he didn't have such a good year, it would for sure be a yellow and maybe even a green, just because Beasley and Brown are getting up there in age and were both hurt last year. But this is red because we have the same guys next year coming back. Brown is the only one who's not under contract for 2 or more years. And Gabe Davis is going to step into that number 2 role and take a huge leap, I'm expecting, as a big body on the outside who can run deep.
So, Brandon, I got a question for you then, because I always like getting a little inside track on these types of things. If Gabe Davis is going to take such a huge step next year, what are you willing to pay for him from a team that maybe values him on their dynasty team? Because you kind of convinced me here that I might want to go out and shop for him. What should I be looking to pay?
Yeah, for me, it was really how much Josh Allen liked him throwing to the end zone and the trust that was gained as the season went on. I would be willing to give an early to mid second rounder, depending on what kind of team needs you have. If you definitely need a receiver, I would for sure be comfortable giving up a second rounder.
Sounds doable.
I think that can get it done too. I'll keep it going. Sticking with the Bills, last position here, tight end. Dawson Knox we took 2 years ago, and much like the running back position, hasn't really lived up to expectations. So it's a yellow just because at best, a tight end, Dawson Knox, assuming he takes a step, at best he'll be the 4th most targeted guy. And that's if Brown or Beasley get hurt again. So it is such a high volume passing offense. However, the receivers are always going to be so much higher on the depth chart that I don't see anybody coming in and stepping in right away, or even in a year or so, and overcoming knocks, overcoming some of those older veterans, and getting to that second, guy on the depth chart for valuable targets.
Do you think that Dawson Knox showed enough last year that he has that role cemented? Because he's kind of up and down for me. He sometimes makes spectacular catches, and then he'll disappear for a stretch of games.
Yeah, I mean, that's been the story of Dawson Knox. I would love the Bills to sign a Kyle Rudolph, somebody like that, to come in and teach him a thing or two about the position. I think if he can hone in on some of the smaller parts of the game, he can make a real impact. But I don't see anybody else coming in and overcoming the other receivers for, valuable fantasy targets.
Yeah, that position feels a little bit like the Cowboys. I've been talking about our teams here, but there's kind of those plug-in guys. We've had Blake Jarwin and Dalton Schultz and those guys. It's not a huge volume necessity there. I kind of see Dawson Knox and the Bills tight ends the same way. So, let him get his 55 targets and 35 catches and a couple touchdowns here or there, because you guys have weapons all over the field to kind of bridge that gap.
Yeah. All right, that's the Buffalo Bills. We're going to fly down to South Beach now. Jared, what do you have?
So this is a really tricky one. The quarterback situation in Miami, I think, is talked about in the media and by us as fantasy fans a lot more than it probably is being talked about by Brian Flores and that group. You've got to give Tua Tagovailoa another chance. You don't have the safety net of Ryan Fitzpatrick, so I do see it as a yellow. I think they need to invest some kind of draft capital to get someone to push him, but we're talking third, fourth, fifth, maybe even sixth or seventh round. Fresh arm, fresh legs in there. Jake Rudock is the only backup left over with Fitzmagic gone. But you've got to see what Tua is. You spent a significant amount of draft capital on the guy. We've seen what he's capable of doing as a college quarterback, still coming off a catastrophic injury. I think he's their guy. If anything else, if they don't take a look in the draft, bring in a serviceable, Andy Dalton or someone that doesn't quite have that starter profile but can step in if necessary. But I don't see that being a huge priority for them. So for me, it's a yellow at the quarterback position. What do you guys think?
I think a lot of people really want Fitz to be this awesome mentor to Tua and to go somewhere else to a young team this year and be an awesome mentor to a young guy. Fitz wants to start, man. Fitzmagic wants to play. I don't think, he was the most helpful. Obviously, he was shocked that he got benched. There were reports that they weren't on the same page there with the timeline of that. But I want them to bring a guy in who has no plans of starting. And even an Andy Dalton might be too much, but a veteran, Chase Daniel, who apparently is really good with young guys out of Detroit, some guy like that who's going to give no pressure to Tua.
Yeah, I think you presented that well, talking about Fitz being surprised that he got benched, because I remember there being several articles from pretty reputable guys within the league talking about how he didn't feel like he should have been benched. And at the time, Miami was playing really well with him at the quarterback, so it was kind of puzzling. I've seen a lot of rumors that he's thinking about retiring, and I think if he doesn't get a starting gig, he will call it quits. For Miami, I feel like the best thing is to just give Tua a year, see what he can do. Draft him some pieces to help him out at wide receiver, sign a running back, draft a running back, whatever they got to do, and see what Tua can really do in one full year, and then go from there.
I think Eric said it on our episode that if your quarterback is worried about Andy Dalton, then he's not a starting quarterback to begin with. So, sorry, Tua. You're going to have to compete. Fitz outplayed you last year, so...
Yeah, and that shouldn't be an issue for him because, even in college, he had to go against Jalen Hurts, and they went back and forth as starters until Jalen left. And Tua won out that job in a national championship game and never looked back. So competition, I feel like the narrative around that, like, it really shouldn't be that big of a deal for him mentally. I feel like a lot of that is probably just league and team politics.
I've been pretty vocal about being, a Tua guy. I'm still a huge fan of him. I think he's going to have a great career. I think, within a few weeks of the 2021 season, the light is going to turn red pretty quickly, and Tua is going to cement his spot as the Dolphins QB.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And so rolling that into the skill positions, running back and wide receiver, let's lump these two together because they're both extremely green for me. Miami, they overachieved last year. They were a year ahead of schedule in the rebuild. They've done a fantastic job collecting draft picks and serviceable players, but really they've been operating from the running back and the wide receiver room with Jags, just the guys. Myles Gaskin came in and did a fantastic job, but he's not their bell cow guy. Salvin Ahmed, another guy, either UDFA or a late draft pick. Matt Breida has never really been that guy as well. They're going to have to find something if Tua is going to make that jump in year two in the running back and the wide receivers. Devontae Parker, perfectly fine wide receiver 2, maybe wide receiver 3 for a lot of other teams, but he's oft injured and he doesn't perform consistently, so they've got to get away from the Devontae Parkers and Preston Williams. Wilson's baseball. Preston Williams and those type of guys. If they want their young quarterback who they spent, number 3, number 4 overall pick on to really advance. So it's extremely green in both those positions. They've got a lot of draft picks in day 1 and day 2 where they can make some interesting moves to get Travis Etienne, Najee Harris, some of these guys to really fill in, elevate that skill position room right off the bat. And I think pay dividends, for us in fantasy. We can see these guys come in immediately and really put up some substantial numbers if you get all of them put together. So extremely green for those two positions. And then the tight end, I'm still a Mike Gesicki guy. It's been kind of a slow burn. We've seen those glimpses. I see that pretty red because I think Mike Gesicki is, coming into year 3, year 4 at this point. You've got Durham Smythe, who's a serviceable tight end too. They don't need to spend much draft capital on that. If anything else, to take a look at that tight end 3, blocking type tight end in free agency, but leave that out of the draft this year.
So, Jared, you mentioned that the running back is green here, and you mentioned a few of the top running backs in the draft. I've also heard a lot of rumors that Aaron Jones or Chris Carson, guys that weren't tagged today, being tied to the Miami Dolphins. If you're running that team, do you think you're spending that high of draft capital on a premier running back? Do you think you're going out and getting one in free agency? And if you are trying to build around Tua, which type of running back do you think would fit better? The Chris Carson mold, kind of the power runner, or the Aaron Jones, kind of the do everything, catch the ball out of the backfield type?
So, my thoughts kind of changed over the last couple of years. I used to be a don't draft running backs high, and I'm still that way. I think if you get them the back of the first, beginning of the second, that's still a lot of capital, but it makes a bit of sense. These second contract running backs just have not proven to be beneficial in the NFL. We've seen it time and time again. And I think the Dolphins are a surprisingly smart organization at this point. I don't see them handicapping themselves with the top running back deal this year with Aaron Jones. If anything, I could see them doing kind of a prove-it type of deal with a Leonard Fournette. We've talked about guys like Marlon Mack and things like that where you can get kind of some plug-and-play pieces. But if I'm these guys and I've rebuilt a year ahead of schedule, everything seems to be clicking along pretty well. Brian Flores is a Bill Belichick disciple, so it makes some sense for them not to go spend, $78, $88 million on Aaron Jones. Chris Carson, to me, that's what makes sense. So I see them building through the draft and using a significant amount of cap room on some of their defensive holes.
I think Aaron Jones is going to be the first guy to bring back an extremely positive ROI for his new team. I'm sure Kyle agrees with me here and believes in Aaron Jones. And then one thing on Gesicki and the receivers, I don't think enough was being made last season about these pass catchers having to go from a righty to a lefty, back to a righty, then a lefty again. The ball spins so much differently coming out of the hands of a righty than a lefty. And I'm assuming that none of these guys have ever spent much time with a left-handed quarterback. So these guys fits into it being yanked midway through the games every other week. Must have been incredibly tough on Gesicki and the wide receivers, and I'm sure it led to a bunch of their drops. But if that's all we've got on the Dolphins, let's keep it moving. Kyle.
Yeah, so I get the joy of talking about my beloved New England Patriots, and things are bleak from a real football and fantasy football perspective. Kicking it off with quarterback. If you look at the Patriots depth chart, it's not exactly a murderer's row at any position. We have currently, coming into 2021, Jarrett Stidham and Jacob Dolagala. That's it. Everybody else is either a free agent or they're likely already gone. So I think the Patriots are going to either sign a free agent like we talked about on the Rod Pod that JJ mentioned earlier and go with like an Andy Dalton. Somebody like that can kind of hold court for a year or two until they can build up the rest of the team and then sign a big guy or draft a big guy. Or they're going to draft somebody early. Hopefully, even as a fan, I would rather them sign somebody that can hold court for just a year just to see how they can do and then draft somebody later rather than spending that pick, having somebody get beat up and picked on earlier in their career and kind of diminish their confidence in a top-tier guy.
Yeah, I don't think Cam comes back at all. I think he's done.
That fit didn't seem to work very well either. So I don't know if the Patriots want him back or if Cam wants out. I think that's a mutually beneficial parting.
Yeah, a lot of people talked about how Cam had a foot and ankle injury, how he had COVID. We didn't have training camp. It was a lot of hurdles for him to tackle. And I agree. That's tough to overcome, especially in a brand new system when you haven't played forever and then you've got to get thrown back into the speed of the league and have all these hurdles to jump over. But the fit just didn't seem right. Everybody was excited from the beginning, but I was kind of wary of it, and it just didn't seem right. So I feel like Cam's likely not coming back to New England. Wish him the best wherever he goes next, but I don't feel like it's a great fit for us.
So besides like a team with talent, what do you think a good fit for Cam would be? I mean, how can you expect him to do anything with that terrible New England team last year?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's got to be somewhere where he's got weapons that can actually help him out. The only thing New England had going for him last year was O-line.
The problem is there's not a team with a bunch of really good weapons and a great O-line and an awesome play caller who is chomping at the bit to sign Cam Newton to be their starting quarterback.
He's got to be good with being a backup somewhere or calling it quits. It's going to be one or the other.
I don't see him getting a starting gig this upcoming season. He profiles best with a quarterback that he profiles like. So backing up Josh Allen in Buffalo, backing up Lamar Jackson in Baltimore, trying to find that situation where if someone goes down, he's got a ready-made team and he can kind of showcase his skill set. But it has to be an offense that already fits his, kind of his demeanor, his talents. That's what I'd be looking for. Kind of what Jameis tried to do last year. He got Mormoned out by Taysom Hill, but still, he tried to go find a place where he could back up a 42-year-old quarterback and get his shot if and when Drew Brees went down.
Cam would be good backing up Taysom next year.
Oh.
Taysom. Don't you dare.
Yikes.
Philadelphia's got some rough cap situations, but if I'm the coaching staff there in Philadelphia, Cam Newton might not be a bad number 2 for what's been a pretty lackluster Jalen Hurts.
I think you would hear all of Philadelphia like flipping over a car and eating a cheesesteak at the same time. Or should I say a hoagie?
Not a good fan base to do that too.
Yeah, no.
Well, moving on in New England, the only position that I put as a non-green light, I gave the running back position a yellow light because it's not a sure thing. I couldn't give it a red light, but it's the only position where they have some semblance of okayness. They have Damian Harris coming back, who looked good when he was healthy. They have Sony Michel. They're losing James White, but really most of his appeal, especially in fantasy, was when Tom Brady was still there. So while this is a position where they could obviously use a clear RB1, it's the only position that they don't have just a blatant, glaring need that has to be addressed this year.
Do you think, they finally kind of go up and spend a first-round pick on Sony Michel? Do you think there's going to be some reticence to, from that organization to go spend that kind of capital after seeing what Sony Michel didn't become for him?
Yeah, I definitely think there would be hesitance to do that again. I mean, Sony seemed like a good prospect coming out. He showed that he could run the ball. He showed that he could catch the ball in college. And he did well for them for a year or two, but it was still in a committee role. And New England is a team that runs RB by committee. It's known. Everybody talks about it. Avoid New England running backs in fantasy because it's hard to predict who's going to be the one that goes off that week and who's going to be used. And so for fantasy purposes, I try to stay away from New England running backs. And I feel like that's a solid rule of thumb until there's some changing of the guard and the coaching staff and the scheme there.
Which probably isn't for some time.
Right. Yeah. Moving on to the next position, wide receiver. I gave this one a green light as well. I was hoping they would draft a receiver last year, but as has been well documented, and I still get a hard time from some people, I was hopeful that N'Keal Harry in his second year would bounce back last year, but he did not. The number one receiver on the Patriots depth chart is Julian Edelman. He is aging, coming off of an injury, and then you have N'Keal Harry, Jacoby Myers, and a bunch of Jags, really. They don't have a clear alpha number one wide receiver. Whether they address that in free agency with somebody, as Jared mentioned earlier and I alluded to, I would like to see what Corey Davis could do in New England. He's had a decent career in Tennessee, but he really hasn't been in an offense that utilized him to his full potential, I felt like. They love to run the ball in Tennessee. I would love to see what he could do in a good offense in New England. Not that it's good right now, but to see him paired up with a new quarterback, new situation, get him in a new scheme, see what happens.
I mean, I don't know about the rest of you guys, but I would like them to not sign any good receivers because I like seeing the Patriots lose.
True.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah.
Same. Sorry, buddy.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's all right.
But
well,
I do have a
Go.
serious thought on the Patriots receivers here. They have shown such a lack of an ability to evaluate receivers in the draft. Why don't they just stop drafting receivers and just funnel or fill their receiver room out of free agents every year? I mean, you only need one big money guy, and you would only be able to have one big money guy. But why don't they just stop taking receivers? They've shown for years and years and years now that they can't evaluate receiver prospects.
They've always done such
couldn't agree more. That's why I would like to see Corey Davis come to New England. I mean, he's far from Randy Moss. I'm not making that comp at all, but I mean, you think about receivers that they brought in.
You just said their
either
names
through trade
together.
or free agency. No, I
You
clearly said
literally
I'm not comparing
just
them.
said.
But the Patriots have a much better track record bringing in quarterback or wide receivers rather than drafting them. I totally agree with
That's a
Brennan.
bullet point.
Don't get me wrong.
Corey Davis,
I'm
the
not-
next Randy Moss.
There
Mark it
is.
down.
Hey, you make fun of me when it happens. Hey, which happens first? Corey Davis becomes Randy Moss or Chris Herndon becomes tight end?
Tight end
four?
for. Tight end for it. That's easy.
Speaking of tight ends, the Patriots need help there too. It's a big old green light. They drafted two of them last year. Neither of them did anything of fantasy relevance or real life relevance. It's a mess right now. Something's got to give. I've seen some mock drafts with the Patriots taking Kyle Pitts at pick number 15. Feel like that's pretty high for a tight end, but a guy like Kyle Pitts, he might be worth it, and he could be the tight end that is that alpha that they need.
I mean, we just saw Hawkinson go in the top 10 a year ago, right? I've seen mocks send Pitts as high as number 5 to the Bengals. So I don't think Pitts at 15 would be a bad move.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't be opposed to it.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say to that is, we've seen this time and time again. We don't really see what these tight ends are until really year 3. Sometimes we get a glimpse of them in year 2. you draft two guys relatively high. Asiasi was a second rounder.
I think it was a second, a third last year, 2 seconds, something like that.
So you spent that. I feel like you got to see with a real quarterback kind of what those guys are. If you can get Kyle Pitts, but I tend to think he probably doesn't fall any further than number 9 to the Eagles. Failing, Kyle Pitts falling to 15, man, I sure think they'd stick out a couple of youngsters.
All right, let's stop talking about the Patriots. I don't like that team.
Who does?
Hi, it's me, ya boy.
Well, let's get on to the green team themselves, the New York Jets. I'll make this pretty easy for us. Everything's good, green light. Quarterback. I still love Sam Darnold, but this is a complete rebuild. I think Sam's going to end up being traded, and even if he stays, it should be an open competition for playing time. So that is a complete open green light. Yep, didn't think so. All right, running back. After Miami, maybe Atlanta, it's the best running back landing spot in the league. You have Coach Saleh coming over from the 49ers. He's going to play strong defense and hope to run the ball a lot. So they have a great left tackle, Mekhi Becton. Look for them to pick up a running back somewhere, but that is going to be a great landing spot for an RB.
You know who didn't get franchise tag today? Chris Carson.
Or Wayne Gallman.
Wayne Gallman.
Hey, why not both, baby?
Or Amir Abdullah.
Wayne Gallman wouldn't even have to move. He would just have to slide his stuff out of one locker room and into the other.
How dare you? How dare you?
So let me ask you guys a question. On a position like running backs that is such, can go one way or the other depending on their landing spot. For the Jets and the Jets offense, they're presumably going to take a year or so to get the offense rolling, new coach, new quarterback, new system, everything. They'll probably be at the lower end of points per game this year and next at the very earliest. If you have a guy who's a free agent and he signs with the Jets, or you really like a rookie running back and he gets drafted to the Jets in, let's say, the second round, do you try to move off of that guy, or do you move that guy lower in your rankings just because he's on the Jets this year?
I don't think I would try to move him, because I feel like that's a good place for somebody to go to have a solid start at being an every down running back. So opportunity is most definitely there, and if it's somebody that also has talent, you have talent, opportunity in the same player, I'm absolutely going to hold on to him.
Yeah, I think you treat it the same way that you treated Le'Veon Bell a few years ago. Everyone kind of came off Le'Veon Bell after he ended up with the Jets, and I went and tried to acquire him. It didn't work out, but it made sense to try to go get a guy of that caliber. If you have a high caliber guy go there, he's going to get the carries. You're not going to have to worry about him sharing too much. You're not going to get RB1 numbers probably in year one, but a lot of people are going to be getting off what's perceived as a sinking ship, which really should be kind of an ascending ship with the picks and a new coach and everything that they've got going on there, getting away from Adam Gase. Yeah, I'd like to have some of that at a relatively cheap price.
Yeah, I mean, look at what Miami did this year with a new coaching staff, a lot of stuff coming in. Everything points at opportunity for improvement, and that should be encouraging as a fantasy manager.
Yeah.
At wide receiver, I have another green light. Denzel Mims isn't anybody I'm excited about. Jamison Crowder could be a wide receiver too, like as a ceiling with the right QB, but I mean, Crowder's only getting older. They have a lot of nothing here. So any wide receiver would be a welcome addition to this less than stellar crew.
Yeah, I can see the Jets doing what the Bengals did last year with Burrow and then Higgins, and the Jets take either Wilson or Fields at 2 and then a receiver at the top of the second round.
Or at the end of the first.
Or with the Seahawks pick, yeah.
Yep.
That might be even more likely.
All right, well, I'll finish this horrible team off. Tight end. I know. Guess what? It's yellow. What? I know. They're not that great. Herndon, Wesco, Ryan Griffin, but they're all inexpensive. They're serviceable. They all block okay. I would love it if they would add a pass-catching threat, but for now, the Jets seem to like that blocking tight end role. So I don't think it's a great landing spot for opportunity for a tight end. Now, you say it's Kyle Pitts or Pat Freiermuth, then we can have a different conversation, but I don't think it's that great of a landing spot.
JJ, you don't see a guy like Jonnu Smith or Hunter Henry coming in?
No. No, I don't think either of those guys are great blockers. I'm always old school with my tight ends. Like, I want them to contribute a little bit in the blocking game. Jonnu Smith is just like an athletic Gerald Everett. Actually, I think they're about the same. But, yeah, I would love a Jonnu Smith. I just don't think he'd be of any use on the Jets right now.
That's fair.
As a fantasy manager, I wouldn't love that landing spot for him either.
No. All right. Well, I think we're all sick of talking about the Jets, JJ included.
Oh, no, not at all.
No?
Go on.
Okay.
I could talk about the Jets all day.
All right. Well, I couldn't. So let's move it down south. Stay in the AFC, but go to the AFC South. How about the Tennessee Titans? Kyle.
Yeah, starting us off here with the Titans. I'll lump the first two positions, quarterback and running back, together. They have clear starters at both of those spots. I could say it's red, but I said that they were both yellow. And the reason for that is behind those clear starters, there's not a clear backup or complement or anything. If something happens to Ryan Tannehill, it's Logan Woodside or Deshaun Kaiser. Don't really love their chances with either of those. Ryan Tannehill's in his mid-30s. It wouldn't be a bad spot for a backup tier guy to get drafted later in the draft. And at running back, you have Derrick Henry, the Iron Man, one of the best pure rushers probably ever. But behind him, it's Darrington Evans, Jeremy McNichols, and they're all just guys. There's nobody really there. I don't think it's a great free agent spot to go to because nobody's going to want to sit behind Derrick Henry, but they would be wise to draft somebody later on that could be a complement to Henry.
Yeah, it's tough to see fantasy value with Henry taking up so much of that volume. I mean, on the last Rod Pod, I advocated for James White going there if he didn't go down to Tampa Bay, but I don't think he gets much of a boost going to a better offense.
I like the yellow designation here. I think a lot of people would go red, but we tend to see these big-bodied running backs fall off a cliff rather quickly. So, I mean, you think Steven Jackson, you think Brandon Jacobs, these guys that seem to dominate one year and then disappear the next. So I think, yeah, if you get a young guy behind Derrick Henry, they do have potential in a year or two that possibly Derrick Henry falls off a cliff and they have an opportunity to be starting.
Yeah, and I think they'd be foolish not to kind of hedge their bets there because their offense runs solely through Derrick Henry. And if they don't have a similar type of running back to be able to fall back on, that team kind of suffers. So I think you're right. I think we're going to see some draft capital spent on a similar type running back to Derrick Henry, similar body, similar running time.
Yeah, like why not bring in a guy in a later round like a Ramondre Stevenson that can see Derrick Henry, one of the greatest pure rushers ever, and just learn from that. He's a big body back that would probably benefit from seeing how that kind of player runs. Moving on, let's talk about their wide receiver room. I gave their wide receiver room a green light. Everybody, well, I'm not going to say everybody because there's some argument about who the wide receiver one in Dynasty is. A lot of folks will argue that it's A.J. Brown. With Corey Davis headed towards free agency and not looking like he's going to come back to Tennessee, there's really not a guy that I look at and I'm like, yeah, that's the wide receiver too that I want on that team. It's Cameron Batson, Rashad Davis, Cody Hollister, Chester Rogers. Not guys that really tickle my fancy. Would you guys rather see them pick up somebody in free agency or draft out of this talented wide receiver group?
I think Corey Davis comes back.
Yeah.
I think they just run it back.
I don't think Corey Davis comes back. I think he still doesn't like how he was sort of, I don't know, written off after a rough rookie year. I think he has something to prove, and he doesn't want to be in A.J. Brown's shadow.
Yeah, I think this was the first year since his rookie year that he's kind of shown that he could be something. He's just kind of been middling to not good before that. And so I feel like he probably earned himself some money that he's probably not going to get in Tennessee.
Yeah, and if you've got a team that's hovering around 400 pass attempts and A.J. Brown's the guy, you're never going to be a high-volume type of person. You need to go somewhere you can get 105, 110 targets.
Absolutely. Speaking of targets, Jonnu Smith unfortunately did not get enough of them in Tennessee. He's headed to free agency. We've talked about places that we'd like to see him go to on other podcasts. So with him becoming a free agent, that leaves Tennessee with Anthony Firkser and Jared Pinkney. I've heard a lot of buzz about Anthony Firkser being the next guy. He's going to be great, but that tight end volume just hasn't been there in the passing game for them. So I don't know really what they do. If they bring in an older guy that's able to block in line, if they draft somebody and try to groom him into that, or what's going to go on there. But for the tight end position, I gave him a green because it's wide open other than Firkser.
I think we saw the way that they used Jonnu as being indicative of how they value the tight end position. So even if they do bring in someone good, Jonnu, it seems like a stud tight end, and they barely used him down the stretch. So I would be a little worried if someone that you really like does sign or get drafted by the Titans, that they just won't necessarily utilize them as much as they probably should.
Yeah, absolutely. I was talking about talent opportunity together, and this is a case where it's talent's there, but opportunity just was not.
Topportunity?
Opportunity.
Opulent?
Opulent's an actual word, though.
Sorry.
And if you relied on Jonnu Smith to be your tight end one, you did not become opulent in fantasy football this year.
Well done.
From fantasy football this year. No? Opulent? No? Am I using that wrong? Oops.
Let's move on from this whole opulent. I'm not a spelling bee
rich.
guy.
It didn't make you rich.
Rich. Blair, what do you have in the Colts?
So the Colts are an interesting team. I gave their quarterback room a yellow, and that really comes down to how you view Carson Wentz. Personally, as we were talking about earlier, I think he has the potential to turn it around with not just a hot garbage team that actually has a few weapons around him and has a very solid O-line. So I think they traded for Wentz with the intention that they are going to utilize him at least for this year. That being said, it's very plausible that he is terrible, and in which case they would move to a pretty bright green. And it's just going to be up to time to determine what color this really is. I think Wentz has a little bit left in the tank, but I would not be surprised at all if next year we're talking about who's filling that role. At running back, this one's easy.
Yeah, if it was anybody other than Wentz, just because I'm such not a fan of him, I'd be going out and getting whatever shares of that guy who would go to the Colts, even on a slight possibility, because it's such a nice O-line. It's such a good spot for a quarterback, but I'm just not a fan of Wentz there.
No, that's fair. Like I said, I think if it was anybody else, it should be a red, right? Like you trade for a quarterback, you bring him in. This is such a good team with such a good opportunity that it should be locked and loaded. But Wentz just has so many question marks. It easily could be open again next year. At running back, this one's pretty easy. This is a red for me. Jonathan Taylor looks to be a stud, and there's not even opportunity behind him because you have Nyheim Hines and Jordan Wilkins who showed that they could be very capable players either in kind of just a spelling of Jonathan Taylor or even taking on the lead role. So there's really very little opportunity for this position. So deep red for me. The wide receiver is where it gets a little interesting, and I put them at yellow. And again, this really comes down to how you view the pieces they already have. If you think Michael Pittman is the number one, and Paris Campbell has potential to be the number 2, then there's not much room for any newcomers to come in. But if you view those guys more as kind of wide receivers 2 and wide receiver 3, and they go out and they get a good, solid wide receiver to be the wide receiver 1, then there is some potential for growth here. Jared, what do you think is going to happen in the wide receiver room for the Colts?
I think all three of the skill positions kind of tie together, and it's going to be a very conservative, run-heavy offense this year. They're going to feed Jonathan Taylor and whatever complementary backs they have in place, and that's to protect Wentz. And so I think in doing so, they don't really have to invest as much in the wide receivers. They have some young guys, some really good possession receivers, some downfield targets. I don't think they have to do a whole lot. That being said, adding a guy later in the draft to replace the T.Y. Hilton, that type of ilk, I think is probably going to happen. But they've got a few pieces that they need to put together on the defensive side of the ball, specifically the secondary. That's where I think the majority of the beginning picks start. And it's a non-sexy fantasy type of wide receiver that I think we see come in if they do draft someone this year.
Yeah, I think this is another position where we're just going to kind of have to wait and see and really see what Paris Campbell can do once he has an opportunity and he's not hurt, and see if Michael Pittman really can ascend to that wide receiver 1. If those guys fall short, we'll probably be having this conversation again next year and just saying that they do need to go out and get a true number 1.
They're not exactly opulent in the wide receiver room, but they're
Good
steady.
use of that word.
They're steady.
Smart guy, Jared.
I think it works out pretty well.
That whole wide receiver room kind of bores me. I'd rather be late on Michael Pittman and maybe overpay a little bit in a year from now than grab those guys this year and have them not do anything because of Wentz. So the whole room doesn't really appeal to me.
That's fair.
I've always been a believer in Paris Campbell, and he's had a couple of tough luck injuries. He's early got the label of injury prone, which I cringe at even saying because his have been like contact injuries. I don't consider that injury prone. If you're somebody that's like pulling your hamstring 24/7, then we can talk about it. But he's somebody that I expect to make a big comeback, and I'm excited to see what he can do with a new situation, a new QB thrown to him.
Same. At tight end, I went ahead and gave this a bright green, just because no one really proved that they were the go-to guy last year. But Frank Reich did prove that he is willing to give the ball to the tight end, and in a number of ways, in a number of creative ways even. Mo Alley Cox had some big games. Trey Burton was used as a running back, as a wide receiver, as a tight end, used in basically all sorts of interesting, fun ways, and was able to score and be productive in that. The only issue is none of those guys are really that good. And so if somebody is able to come in and be a true solid tight end, I think they have potential to succeed due to Frank Reich, and also because of Wentz. Wentz has shown that he can give the ball to the tight end position. Ertz and Goddard were both very successful with Wentz as the quarterback, and so there really is potential to be a very solid landing spot for a tight end, either through the draft or through free agency. JJ, is there anyone that you think would fit really well on this Colts team at the tight end position?
Ertz.
I was just going to say, yeah.
I think Ertz would fit in perfectly. He has something to prove. Wentz has something to prove, and they have a good connection. Both have the right connection.
So do you think
I think that'd be a great fit.
You think last year was just a fluke for Ertz? He kind of fell off, and you think he still has some left in the tank?
I mean, can you look at anybody on the Philly offense from last year and say they didn't fall off?
Well, and Ertz was hurt on and off all year last year too, so that doesn't exactly bode well for coming back and having a big resurgent season either.
I also don't think he'll be asked to do too much if he's on the Colts. They're going to run the ball more. He won't be the number one guy like he was 2 years ago in Philly. I think it makes too much sense for it to happen. The other thing is the Colts are top 5 in the NFL in cap space, even though they were in the playoffs this year. So they can easily take on whatever money Zach Ertz is owed.
he's been trending towards that Jason Witten end of his career type for a while. And I think that's exactly what the Colts need, a guy that can kind of float in space. You're talking a guy that could potentially catch 80 or 85 balls, which is extremely valuable, especially in tight end premiums. So I think it's borderline inevitable that that's where he ends up. And, man, I'll be excited if he does.
Yeah.
12-yard curl, catch the ball and fall down, the Jason Witten special. I'd take that.
Mike Gesicki. 1 broken tackle, 3 years. Sorry, go on.
It's true.
1.
It's almost hard to believe. That's such a small number.
Hey, that's 1 more than Chris Herndon, right?
Ouch.
No, it's not. And he played 1 less year.
Well, let's keep it going to the Houston Texans, a team that's been in the headlines a lot this whole offseason and last, really. Jared, what do you have on the Texans?
So obviously, if they do end up making a deal to trade Deshaun Watson away, it's going to be a green. It's going to be an absolute green. They're going to use whatever draft capital they get to pick their guy this year. They're not going to roll with A.J. McCarron. In the crazy scenario that we see, a Russell Wilson for Deshaun switch, which I don't think happens, then that obviously becomes red. But I kind of think it is yellowish red. It's orange because I don't think Deshaun Watson gets traded. I think there's been a lot of posturing on both sides. I think at the end of the day, the Texans do not want to trade Deshaun Watson, and where they would have to trade Deshaun Watson, they don't really want to do that. So I think at the beginning of 2021, Deshaun Watson's still the quarterback, so that makes it an orange for me. If we do see a trade, probably around draft day for high picks and 2022 picks and 2023 picks, that becomes a huge need. They move on, they grab their guy, Justin Fields, Zach Wilson, whoever it is. But for now, I still think that's orange because I think Watson stays.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think at the end of the day, the team has all the leverage because they don't have to trade him. They've got him for 5 years, and then they could really franchise tag him. So if they wanted to, they could keep Deshaun Watson in Houston for the next 8 years. Now, the first part of next year or all of next year, if he really wanted to, he could sit out. They'd fine him every day he doesn't show up to work. And the Texans could go out and sign a guy like Andy Dalton and just fill that spot for a year and say, hey, Deshaun, if you're going to play hardball, so will we. That's definitely a possibility. And if that happens, that's just one more QB landing spot that opens up right green.
I think at the end of the day, Watson is a team guy. He handled the trade of Hopkins relatively well. Better than an Aaron Rodgers would have ever done it. He kept his mouth shut. He was pretty content. I think even going back to his college days, he's been a team-first guy. This too shall pass. I think going into the running back and the wide receiver, both very, very green for me. I think a lot of that will serve to kind of alleviate Watson's concerns with the direction of the franchise. Now we've got an actual GM, Bill O'Brien, gone. A head coach and a head coach in waiting type of situation that I think was predicated to ease Watson's concern of David Culley. They need to spend some serious capital in a lot of different spaces, but I think you've got to go get him weapons. David Johnson probably has a year or two left at being serviceable, which he was last year. Duke Johnson's now gone, and so you've got guys like Buddy Howell and Dontrell Hilliard and Colin Gillespie. You've got to go get someone to pair with Watson for quite some time. You've got to do the same thing in the wide receiver room. Will Fuller is likely not going to come back, being a free agent. So you've got the triple C's. You've got Brandon Cooks, Randall Cobb, Kiki QT. Chad Hansen got a lot of run last year, and that's just not going to cut it. So they're going to have to find some guys that Watson, Watson didn't get a lot of say on the coach and the GM selections. They're going to have to give him some for these skill positions to kind of ease that rift.
Yeah, the opportunity is definitely there for anybody who goes and they don't have their first or second round pick thanks to his name is blanking me right now, the O lineman from the Dolphins, that trade, Laramie Tunsil, Mr. Gas Mask.
Laramie Gas Mask Tunsil.
Yes, yeah. Thanks to that trade, they don't have their first or second round. So if they, spend even as high as a fourth rounder on a receiver, that means they probably like that guy a whole lot.
And I think likewise with the tight end position, like we said, they've got so many holes, so little draft capital. It's not a place where they're really going to be able to spend significant draft capital in tight end this year, but it's still green. If the right person were to fall to them, if they do trade Deshaun Watson and they get a load of picks and they kind of reload the cupboards, so to speak, and they have an opportunity for Pat Freiermuth, Kyle Pitts, some of these high-end guys to pair with a number of other different players, that becomes a bigger need for them. But right now, I don't think they have the capital to fill all of the luxuries they need to do from a fantasy relevant perspective.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. And
I
go ahead.
think it's obvious and it's easy to go back to the DeAndre Hopkins trade, but that was really the unraveling of this offense being fantasy relevant. Unless you have Deshaun Watson or Brandon Cooks, there's really not much to be excited about, and I don't even know, what will happen with Cooks going forward.
Yep. All right, well, we're going to move it on to our final team of the evening, the Jacksonville Jaguars. But before we do, I have to make a correction for all of the listeners at home. I thank you, JJ, for sending this in the group chat just here. Chris Herndon does not have more broken tackles than Mike Gesicki. One broken tackle in his whole NFL career. So I couldn't do the listeners a disservice. But I'll let you take it on.
Could you also point out, though, that their per game stats are practically equal?
I will. Yeah, I will point that out, and I'll give a big gold star to Chris Herndon for averaging 24.1 yards per game. Let's clap it up for Chris Herndon.
Backhanded.
Which is only 7.3 less yards than Mike Gesicki. That's a half of a Jason Witten turnaround catch.
That's all it is. JJ, what do you have on the Jags?
Advanced tight end metrics.
I'm just waiting for y'all to tucker yourselves out.
I don't think that'll happen. I mean,
I teach middle school. I have lots of patience. All right, well,
I'm a nurse. I have more patience.
So I don't know what I did first time I came on the Rule of 3 pod. Got made fun of for my age. Come on a second time. The two teams I get are the Jets and the Jags. All right, I get it. I get what's going on. That's fine. So I only take the worst of the worst. Let's look at the Jags. Quarterbacks, green light. Right? Trevor Lawrence is going to land there. Nothing in his way but a mullet. They don't even care about Minshew. Trevor Lawrence all the way. Running back room. Yellow? I mean, I know Robinson's there. Robinson's pretty good. They have no draft capital invested in him, which is very good. He's inexpensive. But that also means they don't have any loyalty to him. So I see them trying to add something rather than a Raquel Armstead, who I still don't know if he's recovered from COVID. I know Dare Ogunbowale is there, but they need a second running back.
I'd like to apologize to all the readers out there who read my piece advocating for Raquel Armstead last summer.
A farewell to Armstead.
Yes. Thank you for that title.
You're welcome.
However,
you could not have predicted that his immune system could not fight its way out of a wet paper sack, though. That's not on you.
Thank you.
Well, that's okay. I was pretty sure that Truth or Dare would be the sleeper back in the Bucks backfield. Wah, wah.
And all this time, we should have been counting on Mr. Robinson.
All that time. So let's just keep moving. Wide receiver room is green. Now, it's actually one of their better positions. I mean, they have Chark and Chenault, both young, talented receivers. They have Colin Johnson, who might turn into something, but they don't have an alpha receiver that I see. They have two good receivers, but I don't see an alpha. So they sure could use one. And I think that second first-round pick they have is probably going to be spent on a wideout. And with Trevor Lawrence, man, they're going to see a lot of action. So,
yeah, I think with Trevor Lawrence, DJ Shark could become a true number one. I still think he has top 20 potential. Maybe he's not fighting for that top 10 spot, but with a true elite quarterback, I've seen some pretty good flashes out of DJ Shark, and I think he has, maybe not a true alpha, but definitely a solid wide receiver one.
That was something I wanted to mention as well, is I've seen a lot of buzz on Twitter about Laviska Shenault, which is totally warranted. He's an athletic specimen that can do all kinds of stuff on the field, but nobody's talking about DJ Chark. He's 24 years old. He's 6'4", 200 pounds. Like, he's the build of a wide receiver one. He's fast. He's been a top 20 wide receiver in PPR before. I think with a good quarterback and a better offense all around, I think he's got a shot at being that wide receiver one. But that doesn't mean that they shouldn't draft one. Why not add to the talent pool? The rich get richer. The opulent get
wait,
opulent.
Did you just refer to the Jaguars as the rich getting richer?
No, I was saying if they can, if he's a wide receiver one and they draft a wide receiver in the first round.
More, opulent test. Come on, grammar people.
I totally agree on Chark. I'm a huge fan of him. Kyle, you mentioned his height, weight, 6'4", 200 plus pounds. You didn't mention that he ran a faster 40 time than Hollywood Brown. So I think he absolutely has all the tools to be that guy. But I think they should go out and sign Kenny Golladay. 2 6'4" guys on both of the outside. And we've seen what adding a Stephon Diggs can do to a Josh Allen. We know what adding a Hopkins can do to a Kyler. That's already 2-3 years into their careers. Why not just start Trevor Lawrence's career with the Chark and the Laviska and the Kenny Golladay? Give him as many weapons in year one.
I'm for it.
Yeah.
Why not? They have the cap space.
They may not run the ball, honestly, and I wouldn't blame them.
Just use Laviska as a pseudo running back, 5-yard routes.
Yeah. Well, and he can even run the ball.
Yeah.
He's done it. He did it in college. He did it some last year.
Well, James Robinson showed that he can do it too. So.
Oh yeah. No, he's absolutely there.
Okay.
All jokes aside, yeah.
All right, last position, tight
I'm
end.
dumb. I'm not stupid.
Tight end is a completely green position. They have Tyler Eifert and Josh Oliver, but if you're excited about that, I feel sorry for your life because that's nothing to be excited about. I think that Jacksonville should pick up either Hunter Henry or Jonnu Smith. I think they might be able to utilize their skills much better than their previous homes.
I agree.
But that's a green position, green light.
Yeah, definitely.
With all the guys we're sending to Jacksonville, they're going to be winning the AFC next year, it sounds like.
Well, it is amazing how bad the Jacksonville Jaguars were. But when they start adding weapons, everybody gets excited. Yet when the Jets, who weren't as bad as the Jaguars, start adding weapons, everybody says the same old Jets.
The Jets don't have the Bills in their division.
Who?
I think with any team, though, like the Jags, and they have an open spot, it's green because their defense is so bad, they're going to chuck it all over. They're expected to throw the ball so much and be in, at least high-scoring games where they have the opportunity to score points, even if they're not. So like the Bengals last year, people loved Higgins and Boyd there, and Burrow, obviously, going to them with the opportunity. I think the Jags are a similar situation.
Well, and I think the Jags adding Trevor Lawrence plus their weapons is a much better situation than the Jets with Sam Darnold adding weapons.
Or the Jets with Fields.
We'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see. And that about wraps up the traffic light segment in the first two divisions.
We'll be back the next several weeks to continue on with this fun segment. Appreciate it, Brendan. And that wraps up our show tonight. I hope it's been entertaining for you as it has been for us. Guys, why don't you leave us with your tags and where the listeners can find you and any final thoughts? Blair?
Hey guys, it's great to be back. I've missed being able to chat with you and be on these pods. If you want to reach out to me, you can find me on Twitter at Blair Perot. That's Pierroz. And yeah, just thanks Kyle, thanks JJ. It's always fun chopping up with you guys.
Yeah. Brendan?
I am on Twitter at BCTAFF. That's TAFFE. I'm getting my second dose tomorrow, but I'm still going to keep wearing my mask all the time, and so should you.
Congratulations.
Laramie Tunsil style or not that mask?
No.
That mask would work just as fine, by the way.
That's a great celebratory for your second shot there.
Hey, at least you're controlling what you're inhaling with that one.
Well, Kyle, since you've already beat COVID, why don't you lend your tags and final thoughts to everybody?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at COVID Conqueror. No, just kidding. Find me on Twitter at KAllen_4. Parting thoughts, check out our website, rideordynasty.com. We've added several new writers and researchers, and they are pumping out content at an alarming rate. It's a lot for us to edit, but we're having a blast doing it. So check it out. We've got a lot of cool new pieces that will get you ready for draft season and help you make some informed trades in the off season.
JJ, finish us up.
Hey, thank you to Jared, Brendan, and Blair. Thanks for having me on tonight. It's always an honor to be here. I love seeing what you guys are doing. I'm at JJ Wenner on Twitter. You can also find me at JJ Wenner on Clubhouse. This week on the Rider Dynasty podcast, we are finishing up our free agency frenzy series with wide receivers and special guest Santiago Casanova.
Awesome. Well, I'm Jared Clifton. You can find me on Twitter at UnstuckInTime82, RiderDynasty.com, or on Reddit at UnstuckInTime82. This has been the Rule of 3 podcast, brought to you by Rider Dynasty. Make sure to tune in to Rod Pod, like JJ said, Friday night with special guest Santiago Casanova, Big Daddy Don Detweiler, and Eric Braun. Follow us and the Rod Pod on Apple's Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you pod. And remember, whatever you do, do it well, and always keep the ball in front of you.